Joining us to talk a little bit about it, Carrie Pickett is a staff writer for the Washington Times. You can find her at Carrie Pickett, right?
No, actually, you can find me at the WashingtonTimes.com opinion page. I work at the Water Cooler blog, and I'm the opinion blogger there.
Aha! Okay, so they can find you there. All right. Marjorie Clifton, principal of Clifton Consulting and senior voter advocate. Thanks very much. Your website is?
Well, you can
Email
Twitter
you?
at Marjorie Clifton.
Okay, perfect. Herman Cain, boy, you know, where do you begin? He allegedly, had an affair for, 13 years? He denies it and says they were just good friends. The evidence might belie that, and apparently she has phone records. I don't even think good friends talk that often.
At 4 in the morning, nonetheless, about financial troubles. That was his review. Was, well, I'm helping her through financial times, and with flowers and hotel rooms, apparently. But yes.
Well, you know what? One of the things that I'm curious about, if they're still an existent of these text messages, is what exactly were the context of these text messages, so we can figure out what the nature of these of the relationship actually was, so then we can sort of settle this she said thing. But a lot of people are saying that he's going to drop out very, very soon. What we know about Herman Cain, I don't think drop out so quickly. He can actually say, this woman made me drop out. I think that he'll at least probably stick around for maybe one primary or caucus.
But you know what? I mean, you see the writing on the wall when he starts talking about his family and what a hardship this has been on his wife and his children and so forth. I mean, that's the classic setup, right?
Certainly, but I think that he has enough pride maybe to stick around for maybe one primary. You know what? I think that he might want to just say, well, you know what? I didn't do that well for this caucus or this primary, and I'm out of here. But I don't think he's going to want to lay it down.
Well, given all of the revelations that seem to be popping up every week associated with Herman Cain, another 5 weeks before the January 3rd Iowa caucus could be painful.
Right. And I don't think he has the funding. I mean, honestly, his funding has been dropping off since the end of October. And I think that he might have hired Anthony Weiner's staff to come and handle all the sexual allegations, because, I mean, the way this has been dealt with is shocking. And every political strategist I know who's worked on presidential campaigns says, you never get all the skeletons when you ask for them in advance. And so I don't think they've been prepared for it. I don't think they've dealt with it well. And I mean, Gingrich, look at Gingrich. I mean, he does not have a rosy past, and he's struggling with Christian and conservative voters. But his going out and apologizing to God and making that very public has played very well from him. And maybe Cain just needs to come out with it and deal with it up front.
Newt's baggage, both personal and professional, have been so well known for so long that I think it may be factored into the vote and the consciousness of the party.
Well, I'm just curious as to why a lot of these allegations are simply coming from the time when he was at the Restaurant Association. Why aren't we seeing a number of women, if there's so many of them, coming out, as of now, from, say, Pillsbury? How about the time when he was over at, say, Burger King? I mean, he's had a very long career, but it seems like all these women so far have been compacted during his Restaurant Association days. If someone is like the kind of person that we seem to be thinking so far of Cain as, he'd be doing it for a long period of time. It didn't just been compacted just during his time as head of the Restaurant Association. That's what I'm sort of curious about.
I don't know. I find that, especially with men in politics, I think it's sort of ego-driven. I think they're sort of untouchable and think there's sort of a new level of prestige, and as his career sort of elevated through, and I think the Restaurant Association was sort of the height of it. It may have been, and again, they're all allegations at this point.
I don't know. He had pretty high positions over at Burger King and Pillsbury, and I wouldn't say that he was certainly a lower level guy during those over at those companies.
It's always the guys, right?
That's true.
There aren't any female politicians that are ever accused of this sort of thing. Well, maybe Governor Nikki Haley, was accused of it at some point in time, but boy, that's rare, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess women are just a lot more responsible and thoughtful and.
Well, and there to get the job done. And I mean, as we
Right.
see with women in politics and women in leadership, women typically take power to give power away. And I think for men, it's a little bit more ego-driven. I know that's a vast, generalization, but I think that it does feed in a different way and resonate in a different way. And women are there; they don't have time for this. We've got too many things that we're trying to do. We don't have time in the day to, make calls at 4 a.m. We're exhausted and getting up.
Well, you know what? I think also it's the generalization of if a woman is caught in a certain circumstance with a guy, I think the backlash is a lot worse as opposed to when, say, a guy is in the same circumstance. Yes, certainly in politics it's bad, but it's almost like you have a bunch of guys going, way to go! They're almost thought of it as like a player, so to speak. With a woman, it's the exact opposite.
Well, the great beneficiary, it would appear, of the demise of Herman Cain is the resurrection of Newt Gingrich. His poll numbers are pretty astonishing. Seems to be leading in Iowa. He got a huge endorsement from the most influential, largest newspaper in New Hampshire. He may be competitive there. One poll had him in a statistical tie with Mitt Romney, who had been leading in New Hampshire forever. Newt Gingrich is now in a tie in South Carolina, and I bet those numbers are going to go up for him in the near future. He could arguably run the table, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, into Florida, if things go perfectly for him.
A lot of people keep forgetting with Newt Gingrich that he has a lot of, I keep saying this, he has a lot of bridges to mend back on Capitol Hill, particularly with the Republican Party. He has, remember, he really angered many conservatives, many Republicans, because he'll say one thing and then he'll end up doing another, particularly with the leadership back during the days of the 90s. So this is probably why he hasn't gotten a number of or any endorsements actually up on Capitol Hill. Now, we have to remember this with Gingrich, and for all the flip-flops that say Romney is being accused of, Gingrich kind of has his own sort of back and forth as well with the issues.
Sure. But you know what? There's an interesting parallel. Everybody after the 1960 election, hated Richard Nixon. He had a real severe image problem. He changed his image in 1968. The new Nixon. You guys are too young to remember this sort of thing. But he did basically a very glitzy media blitz, excluding a lot of the traditional reporters, going directly to people. It was sort of a setup. And it worked. Journalists started writing about the new Nixon. It improved his image enough so that he won in a squeaker in '68. We're also beginning to read about, I've been reading about the new Newt. Kinder, gentler, mellower, not a flamethrower anymore. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's no question he's benefiting from the stuff going on with Cain. His fundraising has gone up to $165,000 a day. It's tripled since late October. But in terms of the new Newt, I don't feel personally the sincerity behind his apologies and his, I'm putting it out there. I think there has been a shift in him, and I think there absolutely is more substance in him than there is in, say, Perry or Bachmann and some of these other candidates. He does have the history, but he's business as usual in Washington, D.C. And again, that's where all of the current articles are coming out about his being a lobbyist or not a lobbyist. He's not registered, but he was acting as a lobbyist. It's
New York
story.
Times has a big piece today on Newt Gingrich, and he's this close to the line of lobbying. He's engaging in influence peddling in many ways, but not lobbying technically.
Well, it's something to keep in mind, even with his high polling over in Gallup, and with the intensity rating that Gallup points out. Even though he's in the anti-Romney spot that, say, Bachmann and that Cain and that Perry were once in, he doesn't have the same intensity that even Bachmann, Cain, and Perry had when they were in that same slot.
Right.
He doesn't have that same sort of like Tea Party-ish conservative, excitement that, say, those other three had before they went, downward.
Yeah, I wonder if part of the new Newt was reflected in his statement on immigration, and let's listen to a soundbite from Newt Gingrich. Here it is.
Controlling the border. I am for English as the official language of government. I am for American history as a prerequisite to citizenship. We should make deportation much easier. If you belong to a gang like MS-13, you should automatically be kicked out of this country.
Interesting, because he's clarifying his position, Marjorie, and the the statement that he made during the debate in which he said essentially, look, you got a lot of people here. If you've been here for 25 years and you join the church and you have a job and you pay taxes and you raise your kids and everybody's nice, you ought to be able to stay. And so he advocated legalizing those people. And of course, Bachmann and Romney immediately branded that as amnesty. Well, it's let's call it half amnesty. Illegals are suddenly legals if you fit the criteria, although you might not get citizenship. Half amnesty.
Well, by getting in a line. And I mean, it's not just blanket handing it, it's going through a processing. I mean, I think that it was interesting that it was very gutsy of him to come out, I thought,
the new news.
And make that, which, I respect. I do respect. But, in Rick Perry's response of coming out hardlined on immigration reform was absolutely a response to, one, that Perry isn't seen as having substance, and that in primaries, people always pander to the conservative base of their party, and that's what's happening.
Right.
Now, so for Gingrich to come out with a very moderate position, but now he's backpedaling and having to defend it. So his 7 points that he laid out, there are some that I think make a lot of sense. I think there's some holes in it as well. I mean, it included, English as the official language, building the wall, and then it had some other provisions as well around, as people call it, amnesty, but a path to citizenship. But at the same time, it isn't granting full citizenship to anyone who's in the country. And it doesn't give them voting rights. It doesn't give them the rights of normal citizens. It's making deportation easier, those kinds of things. So, I mean, I think this has everything to do with, the language he even used, to me, is pandering to, again, that conservative base and his follow-up.
Let's play another soundbite. This is Mitt Romney, again, talking about the same subject, immigration. Take a listen to this.
He's going to do what I believe he said he was going to do for those people who would be allowed to stay permanently and become citizens. That would be providing for them a form of amnesty. Those people that are here illegally today should have the opportunity to register and to have their status identified, and those individuals should get in line with everyone else that's in line legally. They should not be placed ahead of the line. They should instead go at the back of the line, and they should not be allowed to stay in this country and be given permanent residency or citizenship merely because they've come here illegally.
All right, Carrie.
That's almost like another flip-flop from what he said last time. Let's face it, none of the candidates had given really good answers as far as immigration has been concerned. I've actually looked at a number of the responses in the past on what they said about immigration. Even Michelle Bachmann, during one of the debates, said that she wouldn't have been for mass deportation of illegal immigrants here in the country right now. Now she's attacking Newt over being too much for amnesty. So that's a little bit weird for her to be being so righteous about it. But that being said, it's a very tough issue. No president so far in the United States history has been very great on the immigration issue. And at this point, I think it's just a matter of trying to figure out how we can really cut down on the whole red tape and bureaucracy of it all for people who actually want to come through and become legal citizens.
All right. I want to, because it's such a big day. Oh, look, the Dow's up 426 points on the big board, and we're an hour and 15 minutes into the trading day. Let's go to Peter Barnes, who's standing by in our D.C. bureau with more on this. So, Peter, what's driving the Dow and